welcome again for coming on the show. I was really excited about having this conversation with you. So great to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful, Mac. So, Mac, something that I ask a lot of my interviewees is to introduce themselves for our audience who may or may not be aware of you. If you would, please.
Oh, absolutely. I lead customer research at Google. I worked across several different groups within Alphabet as a whole. I worked about 6.5 years in Google X, working on a number of their early kind of secret projects, everything from computers you wear on your face to balloons that shoot internet down, and help build both their research and design practice there. After that, I went to the largest main part of Google, where I built up the team that works on the search product from a team of about 5 to 35 researchers, and then moved to realigning a cross-portfolio team that worked on everything from research tools to all of our international research and our innovation programs. And I'm currently leading a team as head of research for innovation and insights within our broader consumer UX portfolio. Prior to that, I worked at Microsoft for about 3 years on video games. Prior to that, I got a PhD in applied experimental psychology with a focus in human factors, as well as some additional training in both market research and data science.
Wonderful, wonderful, Mac. I have to share with you on a personal note. I mean, the companies that you worked with, I'm almost like having a fanboy moment here because, Microsoft, we all grew up using their products. Google, full disclosure, has been a client of ours as well, where we worked on some of these, innovative tech. And I love how the campuses are structured as well. The teams are great fun to work with. I'm assuming you have a lot of fun there with all the new tech, especially, donning the hats of the research and the data scientist that you are.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of fun. I find it important kind of in your careers to work on things that that kind of deeply align with your personal values. And for me, part of how I started even in graduate school was how can we design tools to help humans, right? Like with both their strengths and their limitations. Yeah. And being able to do that at large companies where it has this outsized benefit on the world has it's been fun. Like it's just and it's one of the motivators that kind of keeps me coming to work every day.
Yeah, that I'm sure. And the times when we visited the Google campuses, and I just want to tell our viewers, you all have campuses that are themed and designed. So we were in a Star Trek themed building, and that was a lot of fun. For us to go in and, I loved Star Trek growing up, and I can tell that there were folks at Google as well who loved it as much as I did. So
absolutely.
So,
it's,
yeah.
One of the fun parts about Google is as you, each building is often themed, even to the names that are on the rooms. And so every time, even as someone who has been part of Alphabet for 10 years, when I would go into a new building, you'd start seeing the names. You go, oh, what's the theme of this building? Or walking through one of the micro kitchens where I have things set up. It's nice. It builds a bit of fun into the culture that every time you're going in a new building, there's a new discovery.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So Mac, tell me from customer insights and focusing on the customer, focusing on their journeys. What does a day in your life look like? With the things that you do, given that context?
At this point in my career, I tend to be managing managers who have their own teams. And so a lot of a day in my life will involve connecting with both the decision makers who are ultimately responsible for our decisions, as well as teams of researchers who are working on specific initiatives designed to advise on those decisions. So within any given day, in general, across the course of my career, the portfolio has been very broad. So I may end up touching on anywhere from 5 to 10 different topics that are all somehow related. So there may be, for example, a portion of my day where I am advising one of our research teams that's working on customer journeys in a specific aspect. Another part of the day may be working on actual customer profiles or for specific markets that we may be targeting at that time. And then, of course, there are usually a number of meetings where connecting with folks who are actually the owners of those initiatives, whether that is engineering leaders, product managers, and at some points actually marketers as well.
That's wonderful. That's great, Mac. So, from the perspective of how your leadership relies on you and depends on you, when is it when when your leadership or your CEO says, Mac, great job, what are they depending on you for?
I believe they're depending on us for two things. And both of these are ways for those leaders to get to either a decision or a specific action. And what they tend to depend on us for, I think a lot about research as half of the job is the research itself. It's collecting the information, summarizing it, being able to report it in a way that is intelligible. The second half of the job is actually being an advisor, which is applying that same research lens to the leadership you are supporting and understanding the depth of the problem, both from business, a technology, and a user angle, such that you can help advise on how to actually use the information. So in general, when one of our leaders say, one of our VPs says we did a good job, what's normally happened is we have provided information that leads to a direct decision or action. And we've been able to contextualize that information or give advice in such a way that is very clear on what decision to take, or at least what should happen now. A lot of times the way I'll talk about this with my team is that good research is responsible for an outcome that has a measurable impact on the business. There are a lot of benefits to research. Simply by informing others, they are then able to make better decisions. I think that's an admirable goal within itself. But being able to go beyond the research output to the actual outcome of that research, what goes beyond what's been delivered to say, what is the impact on the business? That's generally where from leadership we start getting, hey, that was a really great job.
That I completely connect with as a researcher as well. I mean, that's what our clients, internal and external, depend on us for, is converting that data into insight, into action. If we focus on the customer for you, and I know at Alphabet you look at customers, very differently. There are different types of customers as well. Sometimes it's businesses, sometimes it is the end consumer. But if we look at your customers in general that are external, if we talk about how you leverage insights to improve their experience with different Alphabet brands or with different Alphabet companies, can you talk a little bit about that from the lens of maybe customer journeys, customer journey mapping, or any insights work that you've done? How you tend to look at it, how you go at it?
This is a great question. Just a moment ago, I talked about the outcome having a measurable impact on the business. And, when we talk about things like improving the customer experience or improving journeys, there are a number of ways to do this. And some can be as simple as delivering data that changes the perspective on an issue. But it also, like really great work for improving the customer experience, often makes the outcome for that customer very clear with kind of operationalized impacts on the business. And here's what I mean by that when we talk about customer journeys. You can almost separate it, I think, into two categories. We have work that's focused on defining what the optimal experience is or where the opportunities are to improve the experience. And then we have the actual execution on that experience. And both of these are important. You can't really do one without the other. You know, if it's well executed, but it's not meaningful, that's probably not a successful customer experience. If it's a meaningful experience, but it's poorly executed, that's also not success. So a lot of times I think of customer journeys in terms of how can we map out the experience, usually the existing experience of the customer, including their needs, their goals, and how they currently complete those tasks, to uncover really over that scenario where the meaningful needs are and how well we've executed on those needs. So I think it is very much in terms of if we can identify and fulfill the customer's needs and then delight the customer, we're probably on to a winning product.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mac. You know, that is the essence of everything that we as researchers are asked to do. To give it more flavor for our viewers, can you talk about a project, you know, whether at Alphabet or at any of your previous, employers or clients? Obviously, I know you're bound by confidentiality, but anything you can share in general to give our viewers a sense of a particular customer insights or a journey mapping project that you embarked on, you know, what was the challenge, how you solved it, what was the impact?
Given your mention of confidentiality, I feel very lucky that I've had a similar class of challenge occur across a couple of companies. So I'm going to give a very common challenge and then talk about how we've solved for that in the past.
Beating down on you, you know, harassing you to buy that house, customers leave, you know. So then it becomes what we call the pit moment, or it can be a peak moment. So a peak moment could be you met an excellent salesperson, you know, in that buying journey of that new model home. And the salesperson really took the time to understood your needs, you know, what you were looking for, and they were honest and transparent in how they could meet your needs or not. But they built that trust, and the journey moved on. Because something, Mac, that you know, and I'm, you know, I know you probably know this, or you know this. I'm saying this more for our viewers that may not be as well versed. That sometimes what also happens is people tend to focus too much in just evaluating customer experiences at the checkout stage or at the purchase stage. And something that I thought was really cool about what you said was you were looking at it, you started earlier in that awareness to the checkout, because, you know, that is something sometimes when people don't do it like that, they're just focusing on the purchase or the checkout, then what they miss out on is, yes, you can have the best checkout or the purchase experience, but the customer just doesn't pop up on your site or at that purchase, you know, with their credit card or their checkbook ready. There is this whole journey, these moments that happen before then, right? And if you're not understanding them, if you're not evaluating them, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table. You're losing out in improving that experience, because something that you know we share with a lot of our clients is it's a journey. And think of it also like it's not a linear journey in most cases. It's a cyclical journey, right? Where
That's right.
if and it's also a journey that's going to happen either with you or without you. So if you
Yeah.
control those key moments, the customer's moving forward holding your hand. If you don't
Mhm.
control them, their journey will still continue. They'll just go, with somebody else.
That's right. You're absolutely right. One of the things I found to be true just over the course of my career is the more complex the journey, the more both the longer it is often, and the more cyclical it is. And often those cycles are much messier than we might think about them in a business. Like when you model out the process for something, oftentimes you will, kind of start at state A and move to the final state, like you mentioned, like a purchase process. And it can look like a straight line. If you have someone draw, what do you think the process is from the moment we engage with our customers or the moment they start their intention to when that action or when that intention is fulfilled? And one of the truisms we found over time is it's much more wandering than that straight line. It often is not a straight line. It loops back on itself. It may pause at times. And really the key for us, I got really excited about a couple of things you said. The key for us is understanding what are those critical touch points in the journey.
Yeah.
Not every step is equally weighted. Not every step lands on the same goal. And if you're a business owner and you're thinking about the end-to-end process, right? We're already coming in with assumptions about what's most important, which may be what's most important to you as the business owner, or what's most important to the business. You had mentioned purchasing. It's like if the core of your business is around purchasing and getting that person to actually, whether it's click on checkout and move through the purchasing flow such that you get your part of that transaction, to making decisions on your site. For us as a business, it's easy to look at our own product and say, this is clearly the critical moment of the journey. But when you step back and you look at that overall journey, like you talked about, the critical moments are often things that we have limited control over. It's parts of the customer's journey, and we're part of their journey versus they're part of ours. We're more often than not, as businesses, we're providing something of value to them as a part of their journey, such that they can provide something of value back to us.
Right.
And those things, just like the touch point with salespeople, understanding that someone is going to go for, say, a complex journey, they may have a cyclical reflective process many times before they ever encounter your solution. If you don't understand those things, if you don't have the context, if you don't have the touch points, you're not effectively setting up your company for success. I think often in Silicon Valley, we have a very, launch and iterate culture. And one of the real strengths of that is that you get things into the world quickly, and you see with real customers what's going on, and you can actually make changes to improve it. That in itself is great, right? At the same time, if what you've launched doesn't account for the journey overall, you may actually pick a portion of the journey where, as we continue to iterate and continue to improve, we're actually only creating incremental benefits to the customer, which oftentimes only give us incremental benefits. And some of the largest places for growth, for new customer conversion, are in different aspects of the journey that our tools may not address today. That's where I get really excited. It's kind of back to the one of the first points we talked about like right. The mission and actually improving things for people with the tools we build. Journeys are an excellent way to check and say, are we actually solving the biggest problems for these users? And are we solving it in a way that's holistic for their overall journey?
Yeah, Mac, I think that right there is a moment of truth in this interview, right? Because because for our viewers, I would love for people to take this takeaway as well, that, what you just said, I loved it, that we as a business are part of the customer's journey. And so many times with so many businesses that we work with, we often find that it that siloed thinking takes over, and it's
Mhm.
all about involving the customer in their process, in getting that sort of just confused with the internal mechanisms of that every
Mhm.
organization has. And I think people need to remember what you just said, which is the customers are not part of our journey, we are part of theirs, right?
Yeah.
I think that is key. Something else that I will also underline for our viewers is something that you mentioned earlier about having different tools. You mentioned that you will have the analytics data that you will be evaluating. You'll be,
Mhm.
you'll be doing surveys. You'll be doing some interviews as well. So it's a mixture of both qual, quant, and analytics. And that is something so very, very important that we recommend to clients as well. Because,
Mhm.
our consulting is, look, we live in a complex world. Your customer journeys, whether it's a B2C journey or it's a B2B, business to business journey, these are all complex. They're not linear, and they're not simple. They are full of these key moments that you need to identify, and like you said, you also need to measure them, to evaluate them over time. That cannot be done with just one process or one tool. You do
Yeah.
need this mixture of different things, and that's what we recommend doing. So for our clients as well, we do all of that. And it also depends on the journeys we're uncovering. So, like the builder example that you gave, that I also spoke about, we also do a lot of work in retail and restaurants. And
Mm.
sometimes we have to go in and do a lot of this in the moment insight capture, because there's a lot of insight that's, it's one thing to send out a survey or do an IDI and ask people, okay, so the last time you were doing this, think about it, tell us what it was. And it's a whole different insight to be in the moment with them, whether it's through doing an interview in person, whether it's doing an interview through their mobile device, whether it's doing something using eye tracking, where we've done some of those cool things as well. That's why I told you I was having this fanboy moment, because all the cool tech that Google experiments with, we do the same as well in our practice. And
Yeah.
so a lot of our retail and restaurant clients, we'll fit their customers with eye tracking glasses and we'll send
Mhm.
them in. And then we're getting this sort of cool feed of what the customers are seeing. So, talk
Yeah.
about getting into the mind of the customer. We,
Mhm.
we actually do that, and it's a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah.
so so that's great, Mac. I just wanted to highlight those points in your conversation for viewers to keep a note of. With these
Yeah.
projects that you've done, and it looks like there's a lot of uh, thoroughness in the work and how you approach this. Um, can you talk a little bit about the net impact? So when some of these projects that you've led, when they came out, you presented the journeys, people understood. How did the needle move internally, for that organization?
Sure. Yeah. This is a great question, by the way. Um, so I talked earlier about this idea of part of it is leading to decisions or outcomes that are going to have measurable impacts on the business. And for one such project, I really emphasized with my team um, modeling a lot of times we'll just call it the size of the prize. So what do we think the outcome would actually be? And we modeled one set of journeys that was around some complex purchasing behavior. So it was like long-term purchasing. and identified several places in the journey where we believed that there was a large amount of growth, like up to double-digit growth on some of the metrics around, say, engagement and purchasing behavior. And so what we did at that time was actually presented it to the VP and the SVP, who would be one, most interested in that bottom line output in that particular outcome, and also had the authority and the remit to decide if that was what they wanted to invest in as a company. And so we presented this just as, at least in the companies I've worked in, and in this particular company, we do annual planning. So there is some planning cycle every year where we decide what are we going to focus on, at least for the next 12 months. It's usually nested within a multi-year goal. And so we presented this to this audience before that planning cycle, such that they were armed with the information to say, do we want to include this in how we think about investing in improving the company over the next year, over the next 2 years? And what the result was from showing that was getting our top level stakeholders to say, actually, yes, not only is this a priority, but this helps us to frame how we want to move forward around these types of complex journeys. And so a couple of things happened. The first was among the executive leadership team, they discussed it and established a series of goals that were distributed to the company overall on, actually, we need to prioritize and focus on improving this specific type of journey. What happened from there, because I've worked in relatively large companies, so there's a lot of people to align, was those executives then sponsored leadership teams that were accountable to them to determine how all of the product teams that were responsible for delivering that journey, and there were often multiples, were going to move forward. So a couple of the most explicit outcomes were the company made a decision to focus and prioritize on developing product and features that would support different parts of the journey. And what justified this was pointing to what we believe the outcome would be if we were to address that problem. And then from there, parts of the organization were structured, both through working groups and then dedicated teams, to identify and develop features that would actually support those. And then over the course of, however long it was, I don't remember how long in this specific case, teams would work on features to support those areas of the journeys. So I think it ended up being across multiple years to actually realize many of the things that were pointed out.
That's great, Mac. I'm glad that you were able to get the desired impact, at the end of this effort. And, that is something I will also point out to our viewers, that, with these, not just journey projects, but with research projects in general, specifically with customer journey projects, what we recommend is exactly what you achieved as well, which is, the results were used to drive a certain impact or achieve a certain impact. And the way we've seen some of our clients get the most ROI and leverage these to the fullest is by designing these journey mapping projects for the desired impact upfront. So I'll give you an example. Right now, we have a client, very large company. Their key goal from the C-suite is, this project needs to save us $1 million. That is the desired impact. Everything else, from the coolness of the insight and the moments of truth, that's all great. And, they expect it, but there's a clear outcome. This needs to save us $1 million. Given the size of this company, this enterprise, they're a multi-billion-dollar shop, we committed to it, and we're on track. And, obviously, I would love to, talk about them right now, but I can just say we're on track to achieving tenfold that amount, just in the impact that we think that this work will have, and they agree with us. So that,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. But I credit that client because a lot
Mm.
of times that impact is not clear, what they're looking for. And so it's like, if you know where you want to go, figuring out the how is actually the easy part, right? As researchers. For us, the toughest thing, and I'm speaking for you, but I'm sure you'll agree, even with guiding your internal clients, the biggest challenge always is uncovering what they're really asking for and why they're asking for it, right?
Mhm.
The figuring out the how we'll get there, whether we'll do surveys or analytics, that's actually the easy part. We train for it. You know,
Yes.
the tougher part is what is it that you want to get out of this? And so that's something I want to emphasize to our viewers as well is,
Mm.
maintain a laser focus on that, in their efforts in guiding their organizations. Because if you maintain a focus on it, then you'll get it. And then, Mac, like you said, getting that alignment from different stakeholders, it actually
Mhm.
becomes easier then.
Oh, then yes, that is so deeply the truth. Because things like journeys are part of a larger class of user and task modeling techniques, it's really easy to get caught up in the analysis itself.
Yeah.
And one of the things I loved about what you just said is that really emphasizing and continually revisiting what's the intended outcome versus the output of the journeys, or we can even just say of the analysis you're doing, because the analysis is a lot of fun, and there's always, it's such a rich data source within itself that there's always more information you could give the client. There's always more places that you could talk in detail. But the goal really is, hey, what is the outcome they're looking for? Because that's going to determine, which part of the journey you focus on. It determines which level of detail is appropriate for that audience in solving that problem. So, given you can achieve those results in so many different ways, it's really critical to continually revisit that outcome and say, okay, are we achieving what we set out to do? And if not, what do we need to change in our modeling technique in order to get to that goal?
Wonderful, Mike. I know we're almost at the end of our time.
Nitin, I want to add one more thing. It
Sure.
just occurred to me when you said it, because the example you gave of a client where they came in with a goal and you were able to come back with like a 10x output. I think especially with journeys and modeling, there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Right.
We talked a little bit at the beginning about this idea that like you have the definition of the journey and the perspective we want to take on it. I find that to be one of those big opportunities to kind of 10x the value you can get out of it.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes just by modeling it out and taking a different perspective, you may identify an area that has been untouched by the business or by the team that would have an outsized impact on the results they'd like to get. So I just get really excited when I hear that example from other people. It's like, oh yeah, we're using our tools well when you get these types of outcomes.
Wonderful, Mac. One final question, and
Sure.
very quickly, I just wanted to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
given your experience in all this work that you've done and you've excelled at, I know for me, sometimes there is always a project where I could have done something better, or, I could have improved on something. So just reflecting on some of these past examples of journey evaluations that you've done, is there one thing that you feel like you'll improve on in the next one that you do?
Oh, this is a great question. I feel like every project get to the end of it and it's like, oh, okay, what are the next things we could do better? If I were to give you one, if we're just going to focus on one, I think I would talk about one of the areas that from a technical or technological standpoint, I think holds a lot of promise. And this is really kind of a stronger integration with journeys and data science. One of the hot topics over the last few years has been this idea of process data mining, which is, how can we take some of the structure that you would get from formalized goal or task analysis and then build that in and automate it such that you can get well-mapped processes from your logs, from your analytics portion. And that's one of the areas we do this today, and it's good. I'm always very excited when we see it, but it feels like one of the parts of the field where there's a lot of room to grow and augment some of the work that we do today. So I think that's one of the parts. There's probably two knock-on effects from there. One is I've often talked both internally with partners and with customers about this idea of using customer journeys as a unit of reference or a unit of measure. And, things like integrating with data science gives us an opportunity to standardize that unit of measure, but also to automate it such that many of the projects we are doing are not quite as one-off. This can often happen between companies or even within companies, is because you can model a journey at many different levels. You may get reflections of different types of model, right? Different journeys depending on what the intention of the team was. Well, there's no problem in doing that when I start thinking about scaling and using journeys across multiple large organizations or multiple businesses on different types of problems. I start thinking about ways that we can standardize and make those journeys really just better, faster, easier, more rigorous and standardized to compare between them over time. In my perfect world, I'd love to see us get to a future where we're able to model the journey over different altitudes and using comparable and standardized units of measure, and to have the parts of that process that we can automate so that we can actually focus on the areas that are undiscovered, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mac. And I have some ideas around it, but I think that's the topic for another discussion. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you again so much for your time. It was really a pleasure having you.
Oh, thank you. This was a lot of fun.